Running Wild with Christine, Sex, Success, and Other Slippery Rabbit Holes. Episode 8 on Happiness and Success. Hello and welcome to Running Wild with Christine. You know who I am and what I do by now, so let's just jump into today's wonderful starter point for our rabbit hole. Today I'm here with Dani, a good friend of mine from my UBC days, who is currently based in Vancouver and DJs on the side of his normal 9 to 5. Hi Dani.
Hi Christine, thanks for having me. I'm very flattered and very happy to have this chat with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited. The reason why I wanted to speak with Dani on an episode is because we met, when did we meet? It was like 2009 or 10?
Probably 9,
yeah.
I would say.
Like, coming up on 10 years, holy crap.
Yes.
And we met in university and basically spent like 4 years very close together. And then when I moved back to Europe, we went our separate ways and we caught up, when was it? In September? October?
August maybe.
Oh yeah, that's right. In August for our friend's wedding, which was really fun. I was the only single one at that wedding, except for Dani, who came to rescue me on the night to DJ for our friends. And I was no longer the lonesome pariah.
And it was my first wedding.
Yeah,
so,
no pressure.
No pressure, yeah. With music I've never played before, but it was fun.
Yeah, Dani is typically a, how would you describe the music that you like to play?
I'd say Latin music and electronic.
And this was a sort of country white people Canadian wedding.
Yes. So the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, because we like to challenge ourselves. But on the way back from the wedding, basically, Dani and I shared 4 or 5 hour drive back to Vancouver.
Yes.
And we went down some pretty deep rabbit holes in terms of like defining relationships and society and what the problem with today's world is. And so that's why I wanted to speak with Dani today, because we're actually very different in terms of personalities and, well, personalities maybe not that different, but like in terms of background and what we value and cherish and what we look for.
Probably lifestyle, yeah.
Yeah, lifestyle, that's the correct word. So maybe do you want to, I think the listeners know enough about me. Do you want to define yourself a little bit so that it gives them more context?
So yes, I have more of a regular job, 9 to 5 in real estate development, which is challenging, stress-wise and just mentally, which is something I like. It's problem solving and strategic thinking and sort of big picture. But there's also a lot of paperwork and the stuff that is a little bit mundane that not everybody likes to have, but I think is part of the sacrifice to keep growing in our career.
Yeah.
And then on the weekends, on Fridays, I DJ at a big club in Vancouver. It took me a while to get to where I am, but it's been a fun ride, and it's intense having this lifestyle because I pretty much only recover on Saturday, only really rest on Sundays.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't really consider the preparation that goes into DJing, buying the music, arranging it.
Yeah.
Putting all that time into it to be ready to play. And it's not just lifting up your arms, right? It's all the work that goes behind it, but I love it.
Yeah, I mean, and you also like bought an apartment and have a dog. Like you have a serious real life. I'm like complaining when I'm hungover, but I have nothing to do. You still have to get up and walk your dog.
Yes. If it's raining, snowing, you still have to pick up his poop, right?
Yeah, I mean, I all of my respects, I could never. I'm barely capable of handling a cactus right now. But basically, Dani and I, on our drive back from the wedding, we talked about relationships because, like, obviously it's a wedding, so you kind of go all like mopey and full of emotions and whatever. And you asked me, you were like, so, like, do you think you're gonna get married? And I was like, well, like, I want the party, I want the dress, like, I like the attention. This is not gonna shock anyone who's read anything I wrote. But I wasn't sure about like the actual payment, the paper and the commitment. Like that doesn't mean that much to me. And then we were talking about wanting kids or not, and I was like, yeah, I want kids. And then I'll always remember this because it made me laugh so much. You were like, but like, wait, if you, he was like, if you want kids by the time you're 35, like, when are you going to get married or something like that? And then I was like, well, Dani, I'm like way more likely to get pregnant than married, like in the next 5 years. I was like, one can be an accident. The other one is someone choosing to spend their life with you. I was like, oh, so far the odds are looking like... But essentially, it was a funny conversation because he got us to talk about happiness and how we define happiness and how the problem is with our consumption of like people and moments and places. Like I was telling you that I like have major questions about like the way that I live my lifestyle and how that relates to sort of the ethics of consuming people at the rate that I do, and like how I try to always be respectful and mindful of like other people's plans and life goals and interests and stuff like that. And like your life plan couldn't be more different from mine, but we still like managed to agree on some very like key issues in our society. Mm-hmm. And one of them was that consumption, a constant consumption of people. Like, do you want to say something about it?
Yes. I mean, it's consumption in general. Everything seems to be about consuming things that you think are going to make you happy based on what you're seeing that is apparently making other people happy just because you see smiling faces online and the highlights of some people. You have to focus on the whole behind the scenes. If you only see somebody's highlight reel and compare it to your own life, you're gonna get depressed very quickly.
If you look at my Instagram, my life looks so epic and so wonderful, and I'm like traveling and having champagne on yachts. And then like 90% of the time it's like 5 in the morning, I'm somewhere in an airport or in a bus station with my suitcase being like, fuck my life, this is like so difficult. But all you see is the highlights, and then you compare yourself to like, oh, but like we have to go see this place as opposed to just enjoying where we are in the moment. Like, I'm not saying every moment should be enjoyable. Like in the book I describe all the like shitty stuff that happened to me for that reason, so that we can all sort of like realize that we live very similar lives even if they look differently. But like that assumption that, you know, there's a certain way that your happiness looks like is so harmful.
Yes, absolutely.
And
do you want to touch on like consuming people and how that's for you, or should I say how I see that?
You can say how you see that. Go for it.
I think this is more coming from my own personality. I'm not talking in terms of how it should be or anything. Mm-hmm. But for me, sex and relationships is about intimacy, and for me, intimacy is opening up emotionally, and I don't feel like I can have the physical or any other thing if there's not that kind of like naked emotional intimacy.
Yeah.
And obviously sex is a drive that all humans have, sort of like hunger. If you're hungry, you want to eat. And we all have that. I don't want to generalize, but maybe men have that more as women on average, perhaps.
Yeah.
And same with money. I feel like if someone gives you money, it's not the same as if you earn it. So for me in relationships, it's kind of like if someone likes you for who you really are, and it kind of grows naturally and you have that connection, and then you make love, it's much different than if you just end up with someone.
Totally
right?
Different.
And sometimes I wish I could enjoy it more on a superficial basis, because it's fun too, and it's part of life.
Yeah.
But to me, the intimacy is obviously a big requirement in that sense.
And it's such a tricky topic, intimacy too, because like how do we define it? Like everyone has their own interpretation of like what really makes you vulnerable and what really puts you in a place where you feel like you have that intimacy with someone or that connection. And I think that it's something that's kind of hard to define, at least for me, because I want to say, like I've said in previous episodes that like not all my lovers have been special, and that's for sure true. But I feel like in each moment there was something, you know, like there was either that physical, like you said, like appetite, that it was just sort of like a need based reaction to what I wanted. But there's also times where I feel like we sort of as a society also put a label on that consumption of like, oh, because you'll never see him again, it had no meaning. And like I talked about in one of the previous episodes about this like awesome date I had with this guy who I would never see again, and that the fact that I wouldn't see him again didn't take away for how special it was. You know, it's just like part of my lifestyle now that I have to like accept that certain people are going to come and go because I come and go. But at the same time, I totally agree with you that there is a whole other spectrum to building something and like earning it, like you put it. But I think that applies to everything in life. Like you said, like money and jobs and stuff. Like if you're just handed things, it might not be as rewarding. But that doesn't take away from the experience that you're having. So it's kind of a weird one where I can't like seem to sort of put it in terms that like one's more valuable than the other, because you still like, I had some of the coolest memories that I have for my like happiness are completely serendipitous, and I've done nothing to earn them. And most of the times you're like, oh my god, what did I do in a previous life to get here? Like, how did I get so lucky? But I think those are things that if you stop and think about it, it becomes very tricky, because it comes from the education that you've had also, and like those assumptions. Like, because you were talking to me in the car when we were coming back from the wedding, that you were like, okay, well, I'm 30, I've got a good job, I've got a good place, I've got a dog, like I'm ready for the next chapter. And like that to me sounds like such, you know, a script. That sounds like the way things are supposed to be. Whereas for you, that's like, well, actually, I worked hard to get here, and this is what I want to work on now. So like that tension between those two assumptions is very difficult for me to understand, because I mean, I understand it mentally, but still it looks like to me, you know, that there is a script and that we're supposed to follow it. But I think the reason why we're still friends is because you actually don't see it like that.
And I guess at this point, the main thing is to define success for each person. Yeah. Like, if you don't know what success means for you, you'll never get it. Yeah. And so I'd like to ask you, what do you think success is?
Such a difficult one. I think I am basing my success around, at least currently, it might change, but around pleasure. And I'm not talking about like physical pleasure only. Just like the idea that even if I'm grinding, like I'm grinding now to promote my book, like I'm working longer hours than any job I've ever had, and I've had some pretty intense jobs, because it gives me pleasure, even in the mundane parts that you were describing in your job, when you have like all the like logistical stuff that's annoying. I'm like, okay, well, this actually, you know, I've sent hundreds of emails to try and get, you know, someone to talk to me or someone in touch or promote the book. And then when you get that one sort of positive thing come back, you're like, I'm feeling so like happy, and like this is giving me like the pleasure on an intellectual level. And that's how I define success right now, because I haven't sort of made a mental picture of like one goal that I want to achieve, because everything is moving in my life right now, so I don't really know what it would look like. So that's sort of how I'm describing it as I go.
That's good.
What's your definition?
I guess my sort of the closest definitions that I like are success is living your life in your own terms.
Yeah.
That means very different things for very different people. And the funny thing, I mean, what I would add to that definition is that living life in your own terms, not just now, but in the future too. Yeah. So a lot of people live it in their own terms now, at the expense of the future.
What do you mean?
So like, if you're only like, let's say, traveling now and going crazy and letting responsibility and your career aside, yes, you're living your life on your own terms now, but at the expense of the future if you're not investing in it. Yeah. So if you have to find balance between living it on your own terms now and the future, you have to make some investments, because otherwise it's gonna be leading to your own sort of disappointment.
Yeah. I mean, for
You
sure.
burn all your resources and time all at once.
Yeah. And I think that's where I was when I started to accept that I was going to write the book. I was at that point where I was like, okay, do I keep living in the south of France and drinking and enjoying the present, knowing full well that in 6 months I'm going to have to get a job that I don't like and do things that I don't like just because I liked the last 6 months? Or do I, actually do the book and invest in a less pleasurable 6 months of like sitting alone at a desk and getting all my like worst life mistakes out on paper, to build that and to actually say that I've conquered it no matter what comes out of it. But I'm not saying it's an easy thing to see when you're going through it, because I think at that point in time I wouldn't have thought about it the way that I think about it now. Like, it wasn't an informed decision of going, oh, am I investing in my quote-unquote success, or am I sort of... And now I'm having even a harder time figuring it out, because I have to keep living a crazy life if I want to write another book, because that's the problem with memoirs, is that like, it's all my own experience. So I'm like, what am I going to do if I suddenly enjoy being boring? Like, if that's my... You know what I mean? If that's what I want, then that's going to be a pretty shitty book. But I try to keep those questions at the forefront, because I think we don't ask ourselves the question a lot. And I think you're one of the few people that have actually asked me those questions sort of like just spontaneously, been like, okay, so what does that look like for you? Because you, before this job, you were starting to look at sort of entrepreneurship and investing in your DJing and sort of choosing how you're going to spend your time. And I think when you go through a process like that, when you have the space to think about what it is you want your future to look like, and that's a privilege in the first place to have that time. But when you have that time and you can actually spend the time to think and construct an idea and be okay if it changes, that's when those interesting conversations come through. Like, you said something interesting just before we got to recording, that very few people are considering happiness when they're standing still.
Yes.
What do you mean by that? Is that something that you experience every day, like around you? Is that why it's prevalent?
Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying of chasing something. And so this whole topic about success and happiness I find very interesting. I read a book about it called The Happiness Advantage.
Yeah.
It's this guy, Sean Aker, who is doing one of the first courses in the world in Harvard about happiness.
Yeah.
He's studying it for a while, and basically the conclusion of his research shows that, Western civilization and our education and just our society has been based on the fact that we say, okay, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to get the nice education, the nice job, and then I'll be happy. And then as soon as you reach that point, the goalpost is moved further.
Yeah.
So you're always trying to reach for the next thing, the better job, and now the bigger house, the nicer car, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And his research shows that it's actually inverted, that people that are happy become more successful.
Yeah.
And that's because happy people are more productive, they're more creative, they're more resilient to getting sick, they have more energy, they have better relationships. So it kind of improves all your different branches in your life to the point where, I don't want to put a number, but let's say you're on average 30% more successful.
Yeah.
As soon as you flip that formula and you focus on being happy with what you are, who you are, where you are, what you're doing, then you're automatically attracting better people, better work, better everything.
Yeah. I cannot agree more.
I feel like that's something that's completely flipped in our society. We're always chasing something.
Yeah.
And how do you get to this kind of happiness? He says it's basically being grateful for what you have. Exercise, obviously staying healthy and knowing that what you do physically impacts your life.
Yeah.
Meditation, because that sort of allows you to focus on the moment, whether it's for being productive, not multitasking, whether it's on a conversation, whether it's on your lover, whether it's on whatever. Meditation allows you to focus on the moment and be okay with your thoughts without letting them overwhelm you.
Yeah.
And some of these things that you can build a framework around your head to stay happy on a from a scientific point of view, not just from like, oh, it's all unicorns.
I mean, you're totally right. Like, I am basking in a very morbid hangover today, and I've had like pretty negative thoughts all day because I'm like, I've made the decision to drink too much last night, and therefore I made some other decisions then, and then I'm on the couch all day when it's a really sunny day outside, and like I don't feel happy about this. And so even though I'm not someone who will ever advocate for like a healthy lifestyle, because I don't think I can do that from the lifestyle that I'm leading, it would be very hypocritical. But at the same time, I totally see those resonances. And when I am, pursuing a more connected, more grounded everyday life, it reverberates. And the minute that, and I think they're not mutually exclusive. It's not like because you're partying a lot all of a sudden, or if you're multitasking a lot for a short amount of time, that you cannot be happy. But like just finding that balance between moments of noticing that this is, the phase, and acknowledging it as parts of you that need to feel for a certain moment, whatever the feeling is. I completely agree that's that. And I can see that, like, the more you do projects and the more and we talked about this before, of like, the more you focus on the stuff that you want to be doing, the more you find yourself surrounded with people who are doing the same thing, who are pursuing the same kind of end goal.
Yeah, for sure. And it goes back to what you were saying about like being able to have fun and enjoy the moment too. That's also like, it's not all success in the terms of like sacrifice and work. Like, if you manage to enjoy whatever, if it's casual or serious, like that's also being happy, right? Well,
I mean, I think it's being present. It goes back to what you were saying about meditation. It's being physically present now. Like, that can be like, a lot of tantra is meditation, and a lot of other practices that focus on being just present in the moment, on focusing on either yourself or the person that you're sharing the moment with. That's the same thing, whether it is sexual or not, or whatever shape or form it takes. And I think that's so undervalued, because you're like you said, you end up always posting these goalposts, like, when this, when that, then I'll be happy. And it's like, well, what? Or for me, like, people now, they're like, oh, so you wrote your book, are you going to go back to real life now? And I'm like, I don't understand this question. Like, as if this wasn't real, as if it's only real if you have a job and you're putting savings away and you have the script. And it's like, no, I don't think that that's how it works. And I think we undervalue the fact that everyone has their own definition of success and happiness for their own, in each moment of their life. Like, it doesn't have to be one definition for the rest of your life. Like, how would that even work?
Yes.
Because, I don't know, but I still think that you sort of set goalposts, don't you? Like, you have like that kind of, your brain functions like that. You like to have next goals, don't you? Yeah,
absolutely. And that keeps you productive and motivated, but you have to untie it from your happiness.
Yeah.
Or I mean, not to the point where it defines it.
Yeah.
To the point where it keeps you driven. Like, be happy with where you are, but stay motivated.
So, I mean, I don't know if you want to really go in depth about this, but I'm hearing questions in my head pop up. Like, you are in a new relationship that started off long distance. So how do you define like being happy where you are when who you're with isn't where you are? Like, that's a very difficult thing to put together.
Yes, absolutely. Long distance is tough, and for a long time I said I would never do it. And it was actually one point of contention with my ex that I said, no, I won't do long distance.
And now you are.
But then, now I'm doing it because the connection is mostly intellectual and emotional, to the point where you can feel the person with you.
Yeah. Just
from having a conversation and just from having so much in common and so much chemistry. Where, obviously you miss the physical part, but that's just one out of the, say, 5 legs of our relationship, or 4 legs. So the main things are there, which are trust and communication and fun and chemistry and intellectual conversations, and something that keeps you sort of intrigued and alive, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're not ready to move in on or anything like that, but when you know that you're taking things at the pace they're supposed to go.
Yeah.
And it keeps flowing and flowing without anything feeling strained. You do call the person because you want to, not because you feel like you have to.
Yeah.
Then that changes everything.
It does. It's nice to see you so happy. Yeah, it does. And I like you, I think I always say I'm not going to do long distance because my life is so chaotic, and I've done long distance before and it's not worked. And the more I have these conversations and the more I spend time talking about relationships and stuff like that, the more I'm like, well, actually, it's not the distance, it's the person that wasn't working. Like, you could be very close to me and still would be an asshole.
Or even more of an asshole. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we tend to try and categorize things and define things in a way that's. It goes back to my post-structuralist critique of basically everything, of like, we need strong definitions and we need a ground to stand on and we need common, like basics. And it's like, no, actually, we just need to like be going in the same direction. Like, there is no need to come from the same place or have the same definitions or even like as one person stay like in the role that you decided to define yourself as for the moment. Like all of those things change. So basically, all you need to have is communication and like a sort of common like thread towards something.
Yes. You have to be working towards something, because otherwise you can't just be in a long distance relationship without a goal, because then you're on the phone for no reason.
I mean, I'm sure that's what they did like in the 20s when they only had like letters. Like, what was the goal?
Yeah.
But so how do you ensure that you have that good amount and good quality of communication with your current girlfriend? Like, did you guys have very open conversations from the start about what goals might look like, or what your no-nos are? Or how does it work when you know that you have this kind of massive hurdle at the beginning?
You kind of have to be very blunt and clear about what you want. So, like, for example, say at one point we have to be open to the fact that one of us is going to have to move. Mm-hmm. Because if no one's willing to do that, then there's no point. For example, that's one of them. And secondly, no questioning about trust. Like, trust is sort of black and white for me. And if you have that, then you don't have to worry about where they are, who they're going out with. Especially with me, like, if I'm, like, partying for my work.
Yeah.
Like, knowing that she's completely at peace and that I could be at peace doing what I'm doing, because we trust each other, is really important. How
do you trust is such a weird one, because it's so immaterial. Like, how do you establish that? Did you sort of get that feeling when you were with her physically, or is it something that she says? Is it something that she practices? Like, what does it look like for you?
No, there's not one thing. It's just the little things you do. I mean, we were working on this or talking or going out for like 6 months.
Yeah.
You have to demonstrate it on a day-to-day that you trust a person.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to take the step first, because trust is 2 ways.
Yeah.
And if you don't show it, then it'll never come back.
Yeah.
So you have to go a step beyond to show that.
Yeah. It's so true. I'm like stuck in thought. I'm like, oh, have I ever? You made me go into my own head. Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that sort of also resonates with the stuff about happiness that we were saying. You sort of like choose to know why you are where you are and who you're with, and then walk with it, or like run with it if you think that it's going to be worth it, if you think that it's going towards something. So there's no formula. It's sort of all about trust in general.
Yeah. Yes.
Or like faith for whoever calls it that, but.
And the second biggest thing that I learned, that like with all the exes.
With all the exes.
Well, 2 or 3, let's say. It didn't work because we didn't share the same values. People are trying to say like, oh, we have these hobbies in common, or these friends in common, or these interests in common, or whatever in common. But that doesn't matter for anything if you don't share the values.
So what values are we talking about?
values like spirituality, you have to be sort of on the same wavelength, even if you don't believe in the same thing. Sort of, kind of share the same idea about God and life, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Trust, career, sort of have similar ambitions.
Yeah.
Love, like living together, trust, all these kinds of things that
and
are
like
very
family.
hard to figure out until you know the person for a while.
Mm-hmm. But which makes it an important thing to start discovering from the beginning. Like we talked about this in episode 6 with Anita Cassidy about conscious relationships and having like difficult conversations from the start. Of like, and I think this actually would be interesting for you maybe. She was talking about the fact that you have those what if conversation when you're still sort of in the honeymoon phase of like, what if we break up? What's going to happen? You know, what are we going to be like to each other? And what if one of us, you know, can't move? What's going to happen? And just sort of going through those steps as sort of like this is who I really am, as opposed to like the current system of dating and consumption and social media of like, I'm going to try and be appealing to you, and therefore I'm going to like silence parts of me that I'm going to think that you might not like. When those parts are just really there, and you have to make sure, like, and I think that goes along the values thing that you were talking about, you have to make sure that you're both on the same page from the beginning, especially when you have the distance. And so I find it interesting how everyone's sort of ignoring that communication piece, or saying like, oh, it takes time. It's like, yeah, but you have to like sort of start from the beginning, asking those questions and seeing if you have the same compatible values or interests in terms of like your life together. Not interests like you meant hobbies or whatever, but like, this is what I need from my partner, this is what I need from you, like this is what I don't want from you because I like to do this on my own, or, you know, just sort of having those kinds of conversations from the start, I think is such a good way to go.
Yes, for sure. And another thing that I realize is super important is you have to find people that are okay being on their own. Like that's such a big indicator of their emotional status and their emotional sort of well-being. Like people who can be on their own, they're very hard to be motivated to be with someone unless they're exactly what they want or what they're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in the opposite spectrum of that conversation where I'm like, oh my God, imagine who the person would have to be for me to stop living the life of the single gypsy nomad, you know?
Yes. So it would have to take someone that really blows your mind away for you to change that lifestyle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you found yours.
For me, it was like this, because she was like, I really like being alone and I'm happy with my life, and especially long distance, like,
yeah,
to change that whole equation with someone is a big deal, right?
Absolutely.
But then if you go and do it, you have to go all in. You can't like sort of halfway try it because it's so tough.
Yeah. And did you imagine that you would be here? Like, this is so funny because we saw each other in August and you were like, where is she? kind of moment of your life. I think that's like wedding blues also. Like, I'm ready to have like a healthy, productive relationship. Like, that's what I want. But at the same time, you were focusing so much on your life and your I was going to say hobby, but I guess now it's like your profession of DJing and your job and all that stuff. And then like, she just like appeared, right? That's what I gathered.
Yes. Like it wasn't like, it's never when you're like actively looking. It's more when you're just open to it that it happens.
That's so crazy. I'm still like, because we haven't really properly caught up since, and I'm just like, that's so great that you took it, because you took massive leaps. Like you basically flew across the country to see someone that you didn't know. Yes,
and we even joked about it, like you could be some dude in a basement, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it could be. I'm
so glad it wasn't some dude in a basement.
No. So when she picked me up, and she's this beautiful woman. It's like, oh, it was worth it.
I'm winning already.
I'm not gonna get kidnapped, so let's see where it goes from here.
You were like, I'm happy to be kidnapped by you. But and that for me is really funny, because to me, you're someone that's so calculated, and you're sort of like the rational one out of the two of us. And to see you make such a sort of leap of faith was really nice to see, because that's the kind of leap of faith that I make, well, in smaller doses, obviously, because I'm not like dating someone seriously. But if I'm, choosing to like change my travel plans or stick around for a couple of days longer for someone, those are decisions I make. But I always think that it's so much more difficult to make such a sort of leap of faith when you have the stable life. Like you said, like you're pretty happy on your own, you're happy with your life. And so to add such a spur of the moment decision, I was really happy for you. And like, it sounds so patronizing, but like proud of you, for like being like, fuck yeah, I'm gonna like see where this goes. And it paid off.
Yes, and the tough part is like when the majority or many of your close friends tell you not to do it, right? Because from their perspective, they're probably right from a rational point of view that
Did everyone tell you not to?
It's probably not going to work out. It's not what you imagine. You're putting too much pressure on yourself and on her. And even if it works, it's going to be long distance. How are you going to make that work? Did you think about all the consequences? It's like, that's too much pressure on you and the other person. You have to take it step by step. Like, it's just a flight for now, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's the worst case? We end up friends and we have a good time for a weekend.
Yeah.
That's the worst case.
Yeah.
What's the best case? You got to look at what can go right.
Yeah. I mean, the worst case would have been it's a dude. Right? The worst case would have been it's a dude, and it's not who you were talking to. But no, yeah, you're right. Just sort of giving it a chance to be the positive thing that it could be, and not succumbing to like the negative. I don't want to say like I can't put a word on it, but like this, you're deviating from the script. Like, why would you make such a risk when there's perfectly fine people around you? Probably like that's like something that people must have said also, like, why are you trying to make your life more complicated than it needs to be? And it's like, that's not what I'm trying to do. Like, I met someone that I think I might like and they happen to be on the other side of the country.
And this is probably the most romantic thing I'll say. And how I knew is that, you always, when you're falling for someone or whatever, you think this person, you're really attached to her, whatever, right? And in this case, it was different. I was first attracted to her as like, oh, she's a beautiful person. And then she's a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I was drawn to her as a person and her values and the way she carried herself and the way she thought before all the other layers.
Before you could even know if you had the physical chemistry.
Yes. And like, when you're that attracted to a person, no matter like the gender or whatever, and then you got all the other positive stuff on top, like, that's how I knew that I wanted to try it.
That's so nice and romantic. I'm like, when is someone going to feel that way about me? But it's cool, and I think it's interesting how we tie that to all of our understandings, because I think with you, every conversation we've had is like along the same lines, and I think we try to separate all of those, like, private versus professional, or hobby versus job, or try to put things like in nice little boxes, and that's not how they work. Like you have
it's all the same life, the same person, right?
Yeah, it's all the same universe within you. So you have all these sides of you that she might understand or not, that she might value more or less, but they're all part of like this one thing that is our life. And so if you I don't know where I'm trying to get to with this, but like I guess you said this, like, try and enjoy things in a measured way. Try not to overconsume any of it, like any of the feelings or any of the goals or any of the, like do a lot of everything. It's just be grateful for the little things that you do have, and then the little things add and to become a big thing. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Yes, that's completely.
Yeah, what's next?
I'm actually scared about this part because for 10 years I had been working towards getting my citizenship, and now I had it, right?
Yeah, congratulations, you're a Canadian now.
Thank you. And for a long time, working towards getting an apartment and all these things that were more like, I'm going to make sacrifices to get here, right? But now I got there, and it's like, now the world is open for me to do whatever I want. And now it's kind of scary because I was just on this not blind, but sort of focused
tunnel vision
for one thing. And now, like, I know that I want to do so many things, and it's kind of scary, but it's good at the same time because I can take some time to think about what I want.
What do you want?
It's tough. I don't know. At this point, I wish I could go back to university, for example, at one point. I wish I could travel more volunteering, but there's only so much time, right? So I have to be careful about how I structure it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's lots of time. I'm starting to feel, maybe it's also from the privileged perspective that I haven't had a 9-to-5 job in a while. But there's time. There's lots of time. You can do a lot in a little bit of time. Like, that sounds like a little.
Yeah.
But I think it's a scary bit too, like you said, when you get to sort of where you were always dreaming to be, and then what? It's like me, like the book is done, like the baby's out, I did it. Now what? Like I have, kind of like you know, I just got my permanent residency, so I can go back to Canada if I want to. I have a European passport. I can live and work and travel anywhere in Europe. I can do anything I sort of decide to right now. So what am I going to decide to do? It's like all the pressure is on me with no one. Well, I guess, yes, some social pressure of like, you're 28, like, it's been 2 years since you've had a job. What are you going to do? But at the same time, no one's really sort of expecting me to do anything. Like, there's no responsibilities that I need to uphold. So I'm feeling that sort of paralysis of like, there's so many options. Which way do I go?
Yes, for sure. And I think one of the few things we were drawn to each other as friends and everything at the beginning is like, you speak many languages, you've been in many places, and we're so privileged in the sense, like you just said, you can travel anywhere or work pretty much anywhere now. Like, sometimes having too many options makes it more difficult.
Yeah.
Right?
We're going back to dating now. This is my dating problem. I'm like, there's so many people out there. I want to meet them all. Like, and see what
we keep going to the same theme. Like, there's always going to be a better looking person. There's always going to be a funnier person, a hotter person.
A better job,
place,
a nicer
better
country.
Job, like, it doesn't end. It never ends, right?
No.
So at one point you have to sort of grow what you have.
Yeah.
Whether it's a place, like, discover it to the max, like all the surroundings, all the coffee shops, whatever it is you like.
Yeah.
And same with the person. Get to know that person to the deepest levels. Like, every person's a universe. It's like flying to a different planet every day in that person's universe, right?
That's so beautiful. I like that visual. But it's true, you're right. And I think it all goes back to as well what you said before about finding people who are happy on their own. It's like even if the universe of your person is like pretty huge and there's bits that you don't know because like you can't always know all the sides of you, someone who is happy with who they are and knows a little bit clearer of why they are who they are, it just makes the world of difference. It changes, and I think in friendships as much and as in relationships that are more emotional, it's like that's how you cultivate your happy. And ultimately, like, no one is responsible for anyone else's happiness. So if you don't know what makes you happy, like, how are you supposed to work with anyone in society at all? Like, you're never, that level is never going to be obtained other than through yourself. So I think that path to, this is going to sound super preachy or whatever, but like that path to self-discovery is so important, whatever shape it takes. Like for you, it's like going through reading the books that you want to read and getting educated about topics that that you want to know more about? I know you're super passionate about the environment and preservation and just becoming a more effective human in today's day and age. And I think that's like, no matter how different we are as people in terms of our lifestyle, we have that in common, and that we're like, okay, I want to get to the bottom of this, and I want to know as much as I can and do as much as I can to change the little things that I can change.
Yes, that's a big one for sure.
And so I think that's sort of where we can wrap it on our little rabbit hole conversation. But basically, do you have anything you want to say before we get off to anyone listening?
Can I go on a huge tangent?
Do it.
To do with the topic?
Do it.
So you're touching on the whole environmental issues that I've always been interested in. As of recently, let's say a few months ago, I started reading a new book about artificial intelligence.
Ooh.
That I recommend everyone to start reading. It's called Our Final Invention.
Yeah.
And it basically describes our future in the next 50 years. And I've always been worried about the environment, but this is something that's going to hit us harder than climate change. And to me, that's mind-boggling, that there's something that we're not seeing that it's coming. And just as a side note, in case someone's interested in the future of humanity, which we all should.
In case you're interested. Okay, well, that was very doomsday. Now I'm going to go and Google the crap out of it. But thanks so much for chatting with me, Dani. We'll try and do this again. If you guys have any comments or questions or things you want me or Dani to address, get to me on Twitter at @ChristineWild_. And stick around for the next episode next Friday. Bye, Dani.
Bye, thanks, Christine.
No worries.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.